There is a pentagram that is produced by the angles of the streets and avenues to the north of the White House.
You see the goat of Mendes appearing, the ears, the entire goat of Mendes, and the inverted five-pointed star, which is the goat of Mendes, built into the streets of Washington, D.C. No one could have that happen accidentally.
I've heard sillier things, but not much. No, there are no satanic plans in the street plans of Washington, D.C.
The presence of a pentagram in the street layout of Washington, D.C. is said to represent the darkest influence of Masonry in America's capital, and is the driving force behind images such as this one, which suggests that all the other buildings and monuments are of satanic origin. As many are aware, the presence of the pentagram is greatly disputed. During the Middle Ages, the pentagram was a symbol of good luck and protection when used by those who practice magic.
And one of the things they came upon was the idea that if there were such things as demons and spirits, then they should be able to summon them, either just to observe them to prove that they existed, or to control them to whatever purpose they might want to. These people were, I suggest, an early form of experimental scientists as much as they were magicians. They were just trying to see what would happen. And one of the things they decided to do is if they were going to call up a spirit or a demon in a specific place, they'd draw a circle, and then they would put pentagrams at the corners as a warding sign to protect them from whatever danger that demon might pose to them.
The inverted pentagram is seen as a highly satanic symbol. Meanwhile, placing a goat's head in the center of it is most often blamed on 19th century French occultist Eliphas Levi,
who arbitrarily decided to say that the pentagram, one point up was a positive good luck, good fortune symbol, and one point down was a negative evil symbol.
Is there really a pentagram in the street layout of the city?
One segment of the pentagram is missing.
I started to look carefully at the maps and draw my lines, and then I find out that, hey, it's not a real five-pointed star. It doesn't have legs.
And you can draw a pentagram over some of the major streets, but the streets don't actually connect to form a pentagram.
There's absolutely no doubt that a partial pentagram appears in the street designs of Washington. You can look at a satellite photo of Washington, D.C. and see the pentagram. It seems to be symmetric around 16th Street, which is the street that runs into the White House. If you look at the earliest published maps of the District of Columbia, the design that was laid out by Pierre L'Enfant, you can see this partial pentagram. But it is just that, a partial pentagram. Rhode Island Avenue does not connect all the way through to Connecticut. I've always wondered to myself if we Masons are so all-fired powerful that we can have this satanic device put in the streets, how come we weren't smart enough or powerful enough to have it completed? But as I understand the use of the pentagram, it's the fact that it is a complete symbol that gives it its power and force. I've never heard of anything being associated with an uncompleted pentagram.
These assertions would seem to close the argument, except for the fact that the unfinished or broken pentagram is a recognized symbol in the occult. Manly P. Hall writes of the uses of the pentagram in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He says, the pentagram is used extensively in black magic. The star may be broken at one point by not permitting the converging lines to touch. It may be inverted by having one point down and two up. When used in black magic, the pentagram is called the sign of the cloven hoof, or the footprint of the devil. Of course, Hall wrote these things in the early part of the 20th century. But is there a record of a partial pentagram found during the Revolutionary era? The answer is yes. In fact, it is a record that shows up during the same time that the street design for Washington, D.C. was being laid out by Pierre L'Enfant, and is mentioned in the play Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Goethe published the first edition of Faust in 1790, in which he mentions a partial pentagram in the dialogue between Faust and Mephistopheles, the devil whom he has conjured. Mephistopheles says, "Let me go up. I cannot go away. A little hindrance bids me stay." To which Faust replies, "The pentagram? That's in your way? You son of hell, explain to me, if that stays you, how came you in today?" To which Mephistopheles says, "Observe it closely. It is not well made. One angle on the outer side of it is just a little open, as you see." While Goethe published his first edition of Faust in 1790, it was between 1791 and 1792 that Pierre L'Enfant drew up the initial street design for Washington, D.C. This might all be seen as a mere coincidence, if not for the fact that Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was not only a master mason, but also a famous member of the Bavarian Illuminati. The Builder magazine, a Masonic publication, in September 1923, said of Goethe that it is no wonder that German Freemasons point with pride to his connection with their order. After he became a member in 1780, he accomplished no great work which did not ring in Masonic accord. He completed nothing which did not lead back to a Masonic origin. Meanwhile, Masonic author Michael Bagent writes that Goethe not only depicted a Faust figure, he was himself a Faust figure, an adjunct of his own personal Hermetic quest. But could Goethe's ideas of Hermetic philosophy have influenced the design for Washington, D.C.? And how might an unfinished pentagram reflect the Hermetic principle of as above, so below? Which brings us to what may be the most logical explanation for the unfinished pentagram in Washington, D.C., and one that seems to fit perfectly with the rest of the design for the city, a city which David Oveson calls a city of the stars.
I have seen it suggested that the unfinished nature of the pentagram in Washington, D.C. bears a resemblance to the unfinished pentagram design that is seen in the motion of Venus. Of course, Venus has a lot of retrograde motion because it is between us and the Sun. And in relation to the other stars, Venus, of course, moves around a lot, but it in effect draws against the backdrop a nearly complete pentagram.
The cycles of Venus rotating around the Sun happen over an 8-year period, during which Venus hits 5 points in the heavens, which form the outline of a pentagram. The female aspect of Venus is the celestial Virgin, which David Oveson argues was the chief inspiration for aligning Washington, D.C. with the stars.
It would support his theory that there was an intentional astronomical relationship in the layout of the city.
In fact, Oveson mentions this motion of Venus, relating it to the 5-petaled flower, many of which appear throughout Washington, D.C., which represent the path of Venus as shown in this drawing from a well-known book on astronomy from the 18th century. Now, what about the broken pentagram? Most astrologers plot the 8-year course of Venus in relation to the zodiac, and their diagrams look like this. But according to Theosophic author David Pratt, this is not entirely correct. He says that while Venus produces a 5-pointed star, or pentagram, there is a slight irregularity. For the pentagram is not completely closed, there being a difference of 2 days at the top, which could mean that the broken pentagram of Venus might look something like this. But which conclusion seems most plausible? Is the pentagram merely an accident? Or does it represent some arcane magical ceremony? Or is it simply a reflection of Venus, according to the Hermetic principle, as above, so below?
With symbols, there are always multiple levels, up to 7 different levels of interpretation.
One interpretation of the pentagram is given by the Thelemic order of the Golden Dawn, which says that the pentagram is itself a perfect geometric symbol of the perfected man. Meanwhile, Eliphas Levi writes that the angels aspire to become men, for the perfect man, the man God, is above even angels.
We're talking about occultic forces. We're talking about the 5-pointed pentagram, which was used by satanic worshippers for thousands of years. If you take the 5 points off of a 5-pointed star or a pentagram, you have left in the middle a pentagon. The pentagon is directed toward the North Star because according to the ancient Babylonians, that's where you gathered power from the gods of the North in war.